This panel will be about the fight against one of the plague of the 21st century, which is human trafficking. So, sorry, I can't hear myself, but okay. I have the privilege to have like 3 specialists on the topic who have been addressing this issue for over 20 years, 30 years for some of you. So first off, ladies first, I have on my right Tatiana Karienko, an international expert and speaker on violence against women and girls on human trafficking. She currently serves as a member of the G20 and IV20, thank you, human trafficking. She was an advisor on anti-trafficking issues at OCE Office of Democratic Institution and Human Rights for at least 10 years, and she works on the second edition of the National Referral Mechanism, joining efforts to protect of right-trafficked person, a practical handbook addressing emerging human trafficking trends and consequences of COVID-19 pandemic, as well as providing technical support and capacity building to combat trafficking in human beings to OCE participating states. Thank you, Tatiana, for being here. I have Maxwell Gale, that I don't have, I'm sorry, a full bio. He works on for the it's Unseen Foundation.
So I work for an organization called Unseen and our other task force called Lightning Strike. So Unseen supports 33 vetted organizations that fight human trafficking in 64 different countries. In the last year, we've supported over 132,000 victims of human trafficking, provided housing for 28,000 victims, and directly supported, directly removed from human trafficking another 5,600 victims. That's just in the last year alone. So we have active cases right now that we're dealing with in 5,000 children trafficked in Peru, with 2,000 confirmed dead in mass graves. 1,000 children trapped and trafficked in Colombia, and Thailand's border being inundated with hundreds of children escaping war and seeking shelter in Myanmar. So we have active task forces in all locations right now. So.
Wow, that's very courageous of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And finally, I have Michel Veté. Professor Veté is a Swiss diplomat and legal scholar with a lifelong commitment to humanitarian action. His career began at the International Committee of the Red Cross, where he held several senior delegations over 3 decades. He is a leading expert as well in international humanitarian law, having served as vice president of the International Institute of Humanitarian Law and director of his renowned summer course over 20 years. So now a key part of his works is to combat modern slavery. He serves as the ambassador of the Sovereign Order of Malta for monitoring and combating human trafficking. So in his role, he's founded and presides over the Henry Dunant University College Foundation. So Henry Dunant was the founder of the Red Cross. He founded and presides he works in international experts to fight this global scourge through research, advocacy, and support survivors. Professor Veté brings us unique combating of deep legal expertise, decade of diplomatic experience, and relentless drive for practical action. Thank you very much. So I will let you start, Mr. Veté. What is human trafficking? It is such a big topic. I don't know if we will cover everything now, but I will give the mic to the expert.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much first for inviting me. I'm very happy to be on this distinguished panel. And clearly, you know, human trafficking is a form of modern slavery. And I would say, you know, as we are so proud of human rights, democracy, and human trafficking is a negation of human rights, negation of democracy, and I think we should see that actually, excuse me, I wanted to show you.
Oh.
What's?
Next.
What's happening? Excuse me.
There we go.
Okay. So
can everybody see?
Human trafficking, there is one word, exploitation, and also negation of human life and dignity, negation of the nature of human beings in all countries, including in my country, in Switzerland, and actually a commodification. Meaning that yeah, you reduce people to objects you can buy and sell, and you can exploit, and then waste. A culture of waste. And actually, Pope Francis say it's an open wound on the body of contemporary society. So I would just mention just various forms of human trafficking. And actually, it could be interesting for all of you to see that, of course, forced labor could happen again in the fields, could happen in hotels, could happen in factories, could happen on ships, and sexual exploitation, child recruitment, especially in armed conflicts, purchase and theft of children. Yes, it happens. Child pornography, unfortunately, very much so now with technical means, organ harvesting and trafficking, and forced crime, which could be begging on the streets, but also terrorism, drug trafficking. So I'd say that is very... And then to give figures. And, Madam, to give figures, if modern slavery were an American state, it would have the population of California. Correct. You live in Malibu. And the economic output of Washington, D.C. And it would be the world's third largest producer of CO2 after China and the US. And actually, there is a figure, 50 million 50 million slaves, that's more slaves than ever in history.
So right now in 2026,
Yes.
50 million people are being enslaved by force in all those...
Force or fraud, deception.
Wow.
You know? You can be promised a job, and then all of a sudden you discover that you are not having a nice job, but you're prostituted. You're not having... you're not as a boy invited to play in a football team, but actually you're victim of sexual abuse, and so on. So then also another 236 billion US dollars of illicit profits every year. So that's actually, it's a very profitable crime.
I have a question for Tatiana.
Yep.
Since you work on more on the side of women and terrorism, I forgot to mention you were the recipient of the BW prize. So congratulations. How women are enslaved and forced, and what is the main factor that not pushes them but pulls them into this slavery? And that's my question for you guys, in this 36 billion, which is the biggest share? Women, children, to you.
So if we talk about the profits, we all know that it is at minimum $236 billion a year. 2/3 of that are profits from trafficking for sexual exploitation. Clearly, there's massive demand. So there's demand now for trafficking for sexual exploitation in prostitution. But there's also for production of pornography, child sexual abuse materials, various forms of cyber trafficking. So someone can be sitting in country A and exploit a woman in country B just sitting at their screen. We have all heard of OnlyFans. That has just been banned in Sweden. Because a lot of these are sites of sexual exploitation. Now, if we really look at what drives it is the demand. If we look at vulnerabilities right now, we have a situation where there's a preponderance of conflicts all across the world. Conflicts create vulnerability specifically to women or for women and children. And traffickers take very big advantage. Just as an example, when the war in Ukraine started, the searches online, and this is Reuters did these statistics, went up 200 to 300%. Men looking for Ukrainian women for sex, rape videos of Ukrainian women and such, which meant that for example, in Berlin, and I did assessments all across, multiple brothels were opened up with Ukrainian women who were offered a job and a place to stay, only to learn that they were going to be exploited in a brothel once they got there and had no other option. So this is, trafficking or traffickers benefit hugely from vulnerability. The sex industry creates massive demand by normalizing violence against women and children. And that drives men to think that they're willing participants in this experience. But the reality is, I have not met to date willing children or willing adults who would like to be sexually exploited by at times 30 men a day.
Wow, this is amazing. You're doing an amazing job. To Maxwell, same question. So we see that you work a lot with kids. What amount where do you work? The unseen, sorry, which countries?
So
mostly
in Southeast Asia and South America. These are massive hotbeds, but also domestically in the U.S.
So not in countries where there's war.
Oftentimes in countries where there's war, but a lot of like the front line of trafficking, it's very difficult to enter these regions sometimes. So we look to identify and target the networks that are operating, in the regions where they're actually holding people after they move them from war and conflict zones, because it's a little bit easier to identify these networks. And our goal is really to find the principals and operators of the networks. I think something that a lot of people don't understand is that this is big business. It's corporate. It's not like a small individual
It's
group.
very well organized.
Extremely well organized. Extremely.
You describe
corporate.
it? Corporate. So you have someone who has like a real net.
Massive networks. I mean, these people are organized criminals. Oftentimes, they're involved in drug trafficking, fraud. A lot of you deal with a place in Myanmar, Burma, like K Park. There are hundreds of thousands of people there being enslaved, and you have, a single individual at the head of that organization, and they're involved in heroin trafficking and drug trade. But most of the revenue they generate is not from direct face-to-face sexual exploitation or interactions, but running, large-scale online pig butchering scams. So people will be flown into Thailand with the promise of a job opportunity. They don't realize that the job is in a border province. They'll be taken to a hotel room, something like that. They'll be told that they need to have their passport used to file some documents, some visa documents. They'll have their passport taken and held, and then be potentially drugged, assaulted and taken across the border to Myanmar. And then once they're there, they're, unable to leave these what are effectively mega factories. They have thousands and thousands of people living in them, being exploited, and not just for sexual labor, but also for manual labor and all types of other tasks. So it's very diverse. It's across the board wage theft. And you said there are no children that want to consent. Children cannot consent.
From
They're
what
children,
you
right?
No, exactly.
So there's no way they can consent, and it's oftentimes it's difficult for people to rationalize or identify how widespread it is and how common, and it happens right in front of your face.
Well, we're in
every
Davos,
day.
and we don't have to go that far. Maybe even here in Switzerland, because when we hear, and that's why we wanted to do this panel, when we heard trafficking is not only about sexual trafficking. It is a huge part, as Tatiana said, but it's also, as Michelle showed, all those forced labors. But my question to you, Max, and also Tatiana, I don't know if you're parents, but these are children. What pushes the parents? Are they kidnapped or are they sold?
Well, oftentimes they're groomed online. So online is...
But are the parents involved sometimes?
Sometimes there's familial trafficking, including in the West. So yes, it depends. Other times, children are groomed and exploited even whilst they're living with their families.
Wow.
I can give you two sort of examples. So it was about 10 years ago now. I saw a friend who had she dated one of my friends, and they broke up, and she needed work, so she moved to Las Vegas. She was about 22 years old, and it wasn't long before someone, effectively coerced her into prostituting herself. And during that time, she met another young girl who was from Norway. And she was there under a fake identity, and she had met someone online when she was 13 years old. And they had convinced her to travel out of the country. And once there, they provided her with fake documents, and they flew her to America. And for a while, it was okay. They used kind of the lover boy tactic. They groomed her further, and then eventually they implanted a subdermal GPS tracker. And for years, she was, effectively held captive because they could trace her anywhere. I cut that tracker out from under her ribs in a hotel room and then had people move her someplace safe. So people don't understand and here you talk about here in
So
Switzerland.
it's like hard, like AI.
This is
wow.
extremely corporate, extremely well organized. These people are hardened criminals with zero regard for human life. And, even here on my flight here from Canada, I think I told you about this, but, once you learn to recognize the signs and you understand what this looks like, you will realize that it is occurring in plain view in front of your very eyes every single day. So a man boarded the plane. He was about 55 years of age. He was with a woman walking in front of him. She looked to be in her 20s. She did not have her passport. He was giving her stern orders. She looked extremely agitated. And she didn't know which seat she was sitting in, which means she didn't have her own boarding pass. And they went back and they sat in the economy class seats. And I was extremely tired, but after about 15 minutes, all of the signs clicked. And I walked back to the back of the plane just to check on them after meal service. She hadn't been allowed to take her meal, right? Because, well, he wants to keep her thin. He wants to keep her as a good product for him to sell. And so I alerted the flight attendant, and she looked up all the records. It's a simple equation, right? Yes, there are certainly 55-year-old men or 6-year-old men who have young wives, young girlfriends. It's very unlikely that they'll be flying in economy class to Switzerland.
And I guess she was not talking.
She was not speaking at all. Yeah. And when I walked back, I looked at her. There was a moment where he wasn't paying attention. And, if you've ever seen someone looking at someone with a look that's pleading for help, it's exactly what it was. So I notified the flight attendants, and what they do is then at the border entry and when they get off the plane, they're going to separate those two people and interview them. And in all likelihood, they'll be able to, get her away from that individual. The issue is that it's not just that individual who is handling her or grooming her. You can remove one of the pimps, one of the operators, but they're part of an organization that will retarget these women who have already been victimized and are already vulnerable and have already been groomed and conditioned and, are living under the threat of duress and coercion. And so if you escape and then you get caught or found again and law enforcement or an NGO doesn't provide you with the assistance, eventually you get Stockholm syndrome and you start to comply with these situations.
You start to believe that.
You start to believe that that's all.
Whatever.
That's all that's possible.
Now, my question to Michelle. So you're very hard part of the Order of Malta.
Yes.
How a religious leader and organization can prevent and combat human trafficking as well as rehabilitating victims. It's very important. Please tell us more, maybe for the public who might not know what the Order of Malta is and what you do for human trafficking.
I would say the Order of Malta is possibly one of the oldest Catholic order, 900-year-old, was established first in Jerusalem as a hospitaller order, then became a military, then had the sovereign power in Rhodes and in Malta. Then, even after being dislodged by Napoleon in 1798 from Malta, still kept his sovereign status thanks to a few countries. But in the last century, first we had 30 diplomatic relations, and today we're on 115 diplomatic relations. We have also an observer status at UN. So it's quite useful because it gives us access not only to UN meetings, but also to governments and also to try to help people. But again, what I'm saying, in cooperation with other organizations. Because I don't think any organization or any government can do anything alone. And that's why, for me, a key word is definitely cooperation. And we, the Order Malta, of course, we have so nearly 15,000 members in the world. We have some 80,000 professionals, but it's not enough. What we can do is indeed in cooperation with religious orders in the field and also with other organizations at the UN to make advocacy. And the next step, for example, will be the 8th of February, a mass at St. Peter's Basilica, and that will be with Talitha Kum. Talitha Kum is a network of religious organizations against human trafficking. But for me, what is important, and we'll come back to that later, is not to ignore this spiritual, religious dimension of the combat against human trafficking. Because clearly we need to pray, and we need to pray also for the conversion of traffickers.
Exactly. Are you talking about religion? You had, I don't know if you were there, but thank you for the invitation. In December, he had an amazing conference the whole day.
Yes.
Pam Bondi was invited. She had, like, I think 2 hours for the Treaty of Palermo, the 20 years.
Yes. This Palermo Protocol. So this Palermo Protocol was adopted in 2000, and actually it's a protocol to the Convention Against Organized Crime. And there are 2 Palermo protocols, one Palermo Protocol against human trafficking and one protocol against migrant smuggling. But allow me to say that those are 2 sliding doors. Yep. Because people who one day accept to pay a smuggler, the next day will be trafficked. So that's why at times, to have legal definitions is good, but it's not enough. You need to see the broader picture.
There are new types of smuggling or giving money, and it's online.
Yep.
So you gave me this name, digital recruitment, and you said CSAM, child sexual abuse material. And how can we government, how can everybody here tackle that, and how the private sector actually can better recognize and prevent that, Tatiana?
Well, the private sector, if they wanted to take real action on this, can, and immediately. The reality is that anyone who's online is in danger of exploitation, and children even more so. So those that target children, they can look up on their social media platform or profile where they're going to school, what they like, what they don't like, what kind of issues they have. And then they have an algorithm developed for each child on how to groom them and exploit them.
So they have like a how
well,
to do
any one of our profiles, right? You can go on there and see anything and everything about us. And once someone is able to enter even a closed network of children, pretending to be another child, they can exploit other children very easily.
Wow.
And as I said, they have the psychological profiles created. Within an hour or 2, they could get nude pictures from any child, and the child will not even know how they did it. Then they will start blackmailing this child for further videos, pictures, and such, until the point where they will start also sexually exploiting this child in various locations, online, etc. A lot of it, as has been said, is also done through the Romeo routine, where someone will befriend, say, a young girl or a young boy, pretend to have a love interest, and then break them down like this. The other thing that needs to be understood here, tech industry can take action. They don't, because this makes a lot of money. Okay?
So even something like Meta or TikTok can make money out of it?
Yes, and TikTok
Wow.
is a major trafficking site for children. I mean, you could go through all the major sites: TikTok, Instagram, etc., Snapchat. All of that is actually utilized to find, groom, recruit, and then move, as well as advertise children. Telegram has gotten in the news as well because it's a major site where child sexual abuse materials are exchanged. Now AI is being used to create child sexual abuse materials. There have been big operations even done by Europol. But what is important to understand as well, that this is not just a social issue. A lot of times human trafficking is looked at as a social issue. This is a national, international security issue. And this is very important to understand because it's not just organized criminal networks that benefit, it's terrorist networks that have learned from them. So Al-Qaeda and MS-13 had a meeting some years ago. They've exchanged tactics. Terrorist networks actually create terrorist financing, which was recognized by the UN Security Council through a number of resolutions to finance terrorist activities through issues like sex trafficking or labor trafficking, as well as forced recruitment for terrorist activities. So there are a lot of these things that need to be recognized for what they truly are. And, and they're not, as I said, a social issue. Crimes like this are not a social issue, like homelessness, for example.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say, Michelle brought up cooperation, and one of the biggest issues is these organizations. It's transnational organized crime.
Yeah, I'm Italian, Russian, American, Canadian, Swiss, and everybody. I mean, all of our countries somehow are involved. I mean,
Yeah,
because there's no border in that, right?
absolutely. And also, as was just stated, terrorist networks rely on transnational organized crime, on human drug and arms trafficking to finance their operations. They also use the same tactics to exploit young men and turn them into extremists. Right. So this is, how do you get an army of people who are willing to die for something they don't even completely understand? Right. You use the same types of threats of duress and coercion, of grooming, blackmail. Children are very innocent, and even so are adults. If you show someone that it's possible for you to hurt their family or their loved ones, and then tell them, if you don't do this, your mommy is going to die. Your daddy is going to die. There are I think most people who care about their loved ones are going to be willing to make personal sacrifices to protect the people they love. And a lot of the time that's what you're dealing with and you've seen these people exact extreme violence, so they're capable, and that they're transnational, and that's also what makes enforcement so difficult. When you have victims in a country like Thailand, for example, or Myanmar, but the people who are, the bosses actually organizing, financing, running these operations, and the people who are working for them 2 or 3 levels removed from the actual kingpins, the organizers, don't even necessarily know who their employers are, or were previous trafficking victims themselves. It becomes
So, oh wow, it becomes something that you inherit.
of course, you take someone who's been trafficked, and once a woman has gotten too old to continue serving clientele, she's still under duress. You have her manage younger women. That way you have a constant chain, and these people, they don't know who the real boss is. They don't know who's giving orders from the top, but the money all flows in one direction. So this is something that it's difficult to enforce, and it requires extensive cooperation between local, federal and international governmental organizations, because as these crimes flow across borders, enforcement becomes extremely difficult. That's why we have a lot of capability as a privately funded organization, with teams of ex-military and ex-law enforcement people, because they're willing to just go and get what needs to get done, where waiting for warrants, cooperation from international authorities, oftentimes the criminals themselves have advance warning, and they're on a helicopter or a boat or a plane, and they're gone in the night. So
Tatiana?
What And the other part of this, right? Statistics. Less than 1% of this 230, these 50 million people are ever identified. So less than 1% of victims of trafficking are ever identified. When you're talking about prosecution, it is significantly less than this 1%. So this is a crime that happens with complete impunity. And it gets creative. You know, we talked about women. Something new I learned about a couple of years ago, that women are not even being trafficked for their breast milk. So, you know, you have women, when you think about sex trafficking, you think of the 22-year-olds, but now women in their 60s and 70s are being trafficked because pornography, okay, has a new or has had a category now that has become popular and trending, which is granny porn. So now older women are being trafficked to fulfill the demand for sexual exploitation, you know, that is specifically targeting them. So no one is actually safe from this.
Michelle, I have a question for you. So, less than 1% of these people are actually recognized, and a lot of them don't want to speak, which is very hard, but some of them have the courage to do it. How can we help them go back? And have you been someone who helped a victim of trafficking go back? Because we know there's a lot of trauma. They maybe don't know what real life is. So have you done it, or how can we do it if we see someone who has been trafficked? How can we treat them, and how can we reassure them somehow?
Yes, thank you. No. Yeah, I think first we need to raise awareness and also to train people, but that could be police officers, that could be also priests or pastors, that could be also airline staff, so that they will be able to identify, as you mentioned, Max, because actually at times it's obvious. And then not only to identify, but to know what to do with this. Obviously, if you are on an airplane, so you go to the pilot and you say, please radio the airport and ask the police to check those two people. That's one way. Then if you are, I don't know, in a church and you see someone and you say, okay, the priest should not only have good words, but should know how to how to deal with this person. And then quite often people don't realize that it's a long, long process of rehabilitation. And then for this, you also need a legal protection, not only legal, but possibly also a physical protection. For example, in Geneva, there is a shelter, Le Cœur des Grottes, but this shelter is protected by the police, because else, you know, traffickers could come back and then also.
So it's a lifelong threat.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say not necessarily if the right things are done. So I established the first International Survivors of Trafficking Advisory Council, composed of survivor leaders. So the people you engage with are survivor leaders, not victims and survivors. They're people who are professionals, who have professional expertise and lived experience together. Those are the people you engage with, who have done the healing and are able to then provide their experience and expertise to how we develop proper tailored responses. I would say when you see a victim, you know, do not approach in a very direct way. And oftentimes people want to know what happened to you. Tell us in detail, without the real understanding that you're just actually re-traumatizing and re-triggering the person.
And maybe putting yourself in danger as well. Who knows?
So there has to be an ethical engagement when you engage with victims, survivors, and survivor leaders all across, but there has to be, I mean, Palermo Protocol, for example, is very, very clear what each victim and survivor should have. The problem is that it doesn't exist in most places, and there's not enough of it.
I think there is a question. Yes, sir?
Why why the conviction rate is so low?
The conviction rate is so low.
Oh,
Why?
oh.
That's for Michel.
No,
He's the
no, no,
professor.
no. I think there are two. First, it's difficult to gather evidence. Second, police, judges, attorneys at law, they say, okay, this woman was raped, dot. You know, but she was not raped once. She was possibly raped repeatedly, but still you have to document this. And then quite often victims are not able to express themselves because they have been so traumatized. So I must say it's really difficult, and at times governments, courts choose the easy way, to say, okay, it's too difficult, we don't prosecute. But then also, this problem of transnational cooperation, it's very difficult because if you have, for example, a woman from Nigeria prostituted in Europe, then how can you gather evidence from Nigeria? Very difficult. We organized we organized a conference in Paris in 2019, and actually we had to bring those people together because if you are in the state of Edo, you don't communicate with Department of Foreign Affairs in Abuja. And the Nigerian ambassador in Paris is not communicating with police officers dealing with transnational crime or human trafficking. So you see, you need really, and that's why I say you need a network, and at times also religious organizations can help police officers and justice ministries to gather evidence and to know where to look for culprits, for criminals.
Can I add the following? One of the reasons the prosecution rates are low because there's lack of political will and commitment.
Yes.
The truth is, police officers know how to investigate crime. So if there was political will and a true push to act on these issues and sharing of intelligence as well between different portions of law enforcement as well as internationally, this can be tackled. Okay, you know, when we look at corruption,
Yes.
breakdown of rule of law, the huge profits, you know, this is where we have the issue. Not necessarily that law enforcement doesn't know what they need to do. They do. Okay, so this is where that equation can be changed. And there needs to be clear, resourced pathway for this. If you're talking about the fact that traffickers are getting $236 billion a year, we cannot spend a couple, of 100 million and say this is sufficient to tackle this. It will not be. So part of that is also creating proper resources and a proper and clear commitment and agenda on how to do this, because this can be done.
I have another question. You're in front. Oh my God.
Okay. Okay, yeah, just one quick question.
Maybe stand up so that we can
Yes.
We're just seeing back.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm wondering in terms of the legal part of this. So there seem to be a lot of loopholes that traffickers will exploit. And when you're able to identify what the loopholes are, what types of advice do you have to actually take it through and create the change for those loopholes to actually be fixed in the legal system or legal structure? If you have any advice to that at all, because it seems like there are a lot of loopholes that get exploited. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was just spoken to, but it really comes with, the enrollment of the regulators and a willingness to address these issues, and especially on a budgetary basis, right? There's plenty of money for the war on drugs. But we don't see any war on human trafficking or any war on slavery, right? And as we expressed, when you talk about $236 billion annually, I think that's a conservative estimate. Yes. We're talking about 2.36% of the global gross domestic product. Okay, this this is a huge amount of money, and it enables people to act in a way and have resources that allow them to mobilize resources in a way that, the people who are looking to fight this just need the tools and the manpower and the personnel to really be able to target these individuals. And, a lot of times the way that we get people who are operating these networks, have enforcement happen, they're not charged with human trafficking violations. A lot of them end up getting charged with, drug crimes, fraud, money laundering, the other associated crimes that go along with these types of activities, because it is so difficult to prove human trafficking or to prosecute on that basis. Now, that's still an effective way to dismantle these networks, but ultimately it comes down to having the resources to take action. It's just like any war, and this is a war of attrition that they're fighting. There are always new kids to traffic. There are always new people to traffic, new ways to traffic people, and they have, a virtually limitless budget. And the people who are looking to defend against this have significantly less resources, less training, less personnel, and not a robust framework of laws that allow people to prosecute, and that provide the protection and services for victims that make them feel comfortable enough to know that they will get support, or even the education for victims to know that they are victims.
I'm in Switzerland and I'm a politician, and I do see that in another way that the loophole is okay. Can we break? But on the other hand, there are some foundations that are paid by the government who exist and want and continue to exist. And yeah, we monitor human trafficking, but at the end of the day, they're just paid by the state. And so they have to keep their salary. They have to keep that. And one of my dreams is never to do a panel like this again. We really want to stop that. And on two hands, so the person, the private person that traffics, and on the other hand, association, foundation that are paid by the taxpayers. And people behind it, oh yeah, we're doing our best. You're not doing your best. You're just getting money from the state. So there are several loopholes that we have to tackle. And we start that with prevention. And everyone here not only can be a victim, but can see with the right tools someone who is actually trafficked. Next question.
Hi. Really enjoying the panel. Terrible topic, but really interesting to hear. I stepped out the room, so I might have missed a portion, but there's a breakdown in the institutions that we all know in society. So the police is someone that, you know as a kid when you're growing up, something's wrong, you call the police. There's an example, I live in the UK, so there's an example in the UK where there are grooming gangs. Everyone knows about it. Everyone has known about it. The police have been aware. They're involved in it. How do you break that barrier in terms of trust of institution?
By institutions actually doing the right thing, by ensuring accountability, by admitting to the fact. I mean, with the grooming gangs, you've seen they have tried to create an advisory council with survivors. The whole thing got messy. Right? It didn't work. But the truth is, if there's recognition, proper services, proper penalties as well involved, and it shouldn't be who is abusing the children, right? If it is somebody from upper class or from a particular background, it's okay. We will not talk about it because it's often the case. Frankly speaking, if we talk about Switzerland, even Davos, it's always in the news where there's money, where there's a big conference, women and children and men will be trafficked because there's demand. So this is the whole point. First, we need to change the people that are here as well at this conference, and that will actually go a very long way to addressing some of these issues, because it will create the political will, but also social accountability. Citizens can hold their governments accountable and say, we do not agree to this, we need change. We want to protect our children, because if before it was those poor girls from marginalized or neglected families. Now it's everybody's children who could be a potential target.
The gentleman here mentioned the example on the flight. And what I was thinking is, first of all, I'm going to be looking out for this kind of thing, those signs and so on. And that's the responsibility of the individual. But again, it goes back to, okay, you let the flight attendant know, you get off the flight, the police will be involved. And when you get to the police, you're talking about the same problems that you have with drugs and other criminality, which is that kind of money buys you police, buys you a free get out of jail pass.
Not necessarily everywhere. This is the whole point. But even in that situation, I was actually in that same situation as well. And frankly, there was a trafficking situation on the flight, manhandling a whole bunch of young Vietnamese women. I went to the flight attendant, nothing happened. I ran around across the airport. Nobody was willing to do really anything with me screaming until, I really took out my documents that I work for the OSC, etc. But at that point, they left the airport. And I was running to every police person there, Frontex and such, and absolutely nothing happened. So this is the whole point. There has to be capacity building, right?
I think it's understanding when you see the scale of the money, and then also, we think of theft, right? And anyone sees, if you see someone steal something from a grocery store, or someone loots a store during a protest and takes a TV, we go, oh, that's terrible, this is awful, right? But that form of theft, okay, is probably only billions, a few $1 billion a year globally. Okay, this is 2 orders of magnitude greater. This is wage theft, right? This is wage theft. Whatever you believe about sex work or pornography, that those opinions vary based on people's opinion. But whether or not someone should be forced under the threat of duress and coercion to perform any type of labor, manual, mental, emotional, physical, sexual, and not receive the benefits of their time, attention, and energy, that's wage theft. And that's what human trafficking and modern day slavery is. And that this form of wage theft it exists all over the world in many industries. There's a good chance some of the apparel that you're wearing was manufactured by slaves.
Exactly. So that's Shein, Temu, that's... I have
Parts
to
of
wrap
your
this
cell
up.
phone.
Can I just add one more thing?
One more, real quick.
On this, rape is not work. And this is where there needs to be a clear recognition. Sex trafficking, it's not if you pay for it, it's work. And if you don't pay for it, it's not work. It is rape, it is violence, and it cannot
consensual.
be work ever.
Exactly. I will give the last round to Michelle, who I haven't heard.
No, thank you very much again.
And then I have to wrap this up.
Just to, you see, we are in the Abraham house. So we are believers. And I think we all believers should definitely pray, not only for victims, survivors, helpers, but also for the conversion of traffickers. And then I give you those 2 QR codes. One is the
QR code here.
Yeah.
Take your phones if you want to know more.
The 50 webinars we organized, and also the Rome conference. And we have the report, we have also the slides, we have handout documents. All of these could be a good complement to what we discussed today. But I was very happy to be...
Thank you. Thank you, Michel. Michel does do webinars online where you can learn more. He also started in University of Nice, south of France. So if you want to know more, if you want to know how to recognize a victim and what you can do, being proactive in this matter, please follow him and follow all those guys. You can ask all the questions right now. Thank you so much for following.